My name is Megan Calloway. I'm 31 years old and I'm a title examiner, which means for a living, I read deeds the way other people read text messages, fast, automatically, and for exactly the one detail that doesn't belong. So when a closing coordinator named Priya Nair called me on a Wednesday afternoon to verify a quitclaim deed with my signature on it, transferring my half of my grandfather's lake cabin to my sister, I asked her to read me the recording date first, before I said a single word about whether it was real. She read it back, 5 months earlier. A date I remembered clearly because 5 months earlier I had been in Phoenix at a title industry conference, 3 time zones and 1,400 miles from the county recorder's office where that deed had supposedly been signed and notarized in person. I told Priya the truth. I have never seen that document in my life. She was quiet for a second, and then she said the sentence that started the worst and best month of my year. Ma'am, I need you to know we have a buyer scheduled to close on that property in 9 days. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet people finally speak. If you've ever found out that something you loved was gone before anyone thought to tell you, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe, because what I did with those 9 days is the reason my sister now tells people I tried to destroy her over a cabin. She's right about the cabin. She's wrong about who tried to destroy who first. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what that cabin actually was before you understand what it meant to lose it on a piece of paper I never signed. My grandfather, Walter Calloway, built that cabin with his own hands in 1971 on 11 wooded acres on Birch Lake in northern Minnesota, back before it was fashionable, back when land up there was cheap enough for a machinist with 4 kids to actually afford a little piece of quiet. He poured the foundation himself over 2 summers. He built the dock every spring and pulled it every fall for 53 years, until his hands got too unsteady to do it and my father took over, and then eventually I did. I learned to fish off that dock. I learned to drive a stick shift in the gravel lot behind the woodshed. I scattered part of my grandmother's ashes off the end of that same dock 9 years ago on a morning so still the lake looked like glass. I work as a title examiner at a mid-sized closing firm outside Minneapolis, which is a job most people don't understand until they've bought a house and realized somebody has to verify deed by deed that the person selling you a property actually has the legal right to sell it. I chase chains of title. I catch the deeds that don't line up, the signatures that don't quite match, the notary stamps that expired 18 months before the document they're stamped on. I have built a career on being the person who notices what everyone else assumes is fine. My sister, Kayla, is 27, 4 years younger than me, and for as long as I can remember, she has been the one my parents worried about, and I have been the one my parents didn't have to. That's not bitterness, that's just an accurate description of the org chart we grew up inside. Kayla struggled in school in ways nobody ever quite diagnosed. She's had 6 jobs in 8 years and a revolving door of boyfriends who left her with more debt than she started with. My parents have bailed her out more times than either of them would ever admit out loud at a holiday dinner, and every single time the explanation was the same 3 words: she's still finding herself.
I loved my sister. I want that on the record before anything else, because everything that follows is easier to hear if you understand I wasn't looking for a reason to be angry at her. I'd spent 31 years actively not looking for one. Grandpa Walt died 14 months ago, in his sleep, in the cabin's back bedroom, the way he'd always said he wanted to go. His will was simple, and I thought at the time, generous in exactly the way that would keep the peace. The cabin and the 11 acres it sat on would pass to Kayla and me jointly, as tenants in common, 50% each, with one condition typed in his own particular all-caps insistence by the attorney who drafted it. Neither party may sell, transfer, mortgage, or encumber their interest in the property without the written consent of the other. He wanted us to have to talk to each other about it. He'd said as much once, sitting on the dock the summer before he died. You two are going to have to share this place whether you like each other that week or not. That's the whole point of it. For 14 months, that's exactly what we did. We split the property taxes, we took turns with the summer maintenance. Kayla brought her new boyfriend up for a weekend in June, and I brought a group of friends up in August. And it was, genuinely, working the way Grandpa Walt wanted it to work. I had no reason on earth to think anything was wrong. What I didn't know was that 4 months into that arrangement, Kayla had run out of money in a way that scared even her. I found this out in pieces, the way you find out most things in my family, sideways, through people who weren't trying to tell you but couldn't quite help it. My mother mentioned once, almost in passing, that Kayla's car had been repossessed in the spring and that she'd moved in with a friend after falling behind on rent. I offered to help. Kayla told me she was fine, that it was temporary, that she had a plan. I believed her because I had spent 27 years believing that particular sentence, and it had never once occurred to me that this time the plan was mine. The call from Priya Nair came on a Wednesday in October, while I was at my own desk reviewing an entirely unrelated title commitment for a first-time homebuyer in Eden Prairie. She introduced herself as the closing coordinator for a real estate transaction on a property on Birch Lake Road, and asked if I had a few minutes to confirm some details related to a deed in the chain of title. I want to explain why she called me at all, because it matters. When a title company insures a property, they build the full chain of ownership going back years, sometimes decades. My firm's underwriting guidelines I have personally trained new examiners on, flag any deed transfer between family members that happens outside a traditional sale, especially one recorded shortly before the property goes on the market again. It's not proof of anything by itself, it's just a box that gets checked, a courtesy call to the prior owner of record to confirm the transfer was voluntary before the company puts its name behind an insurance policy. Most of the time, that call is a formality. A grantor says, yes, that's right, I gave my share to my brother, thanks for checking, and everyone moves on. Priya read me the deed, a quitclaim deed, dated 5 months earlier, transferring my undivided 50% interest in the Birch Lake property to Kayla Marie Calloway for $1 and other good and valuable consideration, signed by Megan Elizabeth Calloway, notarized by a notary public named Denise Furlong in Hennepin County. I sat with the phone against my ear in my own office, in the building where I have spent 7 years learning exactly how documents like this are supposed to look, and I told her, calmly, that I had never met a notary named Denise Furlong, that I had been in Phoenix on the date listed for a professional conference I could prove with a hotel folio and a boarding pass, and that the signature on that deed was not mine.
Priya, to her enormous credit, didn't argue with me or brush past it. She said the words that told me exactly how serious this was about to become. Ma'am, I need you to know, we have a buyer scheduled to close on that property in 9 days, and given what you're telling me, I have to pause this file immediately. 9 days. I hung up the phone and I sat there for a long moment doing the thing my job has trained into me down to the marrow. I didn't call my sister, I didn't call my mother. I opened a browser, logged into the county recorder's public portal with my own professional credentials, and pulled the deed myself. There it was on my screen, exactly as Priya had described it. My name, misspelled with a single L in Elizabeth, a detail so small I doubt anyone but me would ever have caught it, because I've signed my full legal name on closing documents thousands of times, and I know precisely how it's supposed to look. The signature itself was close, closer than I expected, close enough that a busy notary glancing at a driver's license photocopy might not think twice, but the E in Megan curved the wrong direction. I have signed my own name enough times in my career to know my own handwriting the way I know my own voice, and this wasn't it. The notary's commission number, when I looked it up in the Secretary of State's database, belonged to a woman working out of a shipping and printing store 40 minutes from where I lived, a business that, among other services, listed notarizations for $5, no appointment necessary. I called my old law school friend, Sam Ostrander, who left title work 8 years ago to become a real estate litigation attorney, precisely because he liked yelling about exactly this kind of thing in courtrooms. I read him the deed over the phone. He was quiet while I talked, and then he asked one question. Do you have any reason to believe your sister had access to a notarized copy of your ID or a document with your real signature on it that someone could have used as a template? I thought about it, for exactly as long as it took my stomach to drop.
2 years earlier, when Grandpa Walt's health first started declining, our whole family had done what responsible families do. We sat down with an estate attorney together, all 4 of us, and signed a stack of documents: healthcare directives, a durable power of attorney for Grandpa, and, buried in that same folder, a document authorizing each grandchild's signature to be on file with the attorney's office for the eventual estate transfer. Kayla had been in the room. Kayla had watched me sign that folder page by page. Kayla, for one afternoon 2 years earlier, had access to a room full of my real signatures sitting in a manila folder on a conference table while the attorney stepped out to make copies. Sam said what I already knew. That's motive, opportunity, and a template. What you don't have yet is proof of who actually did it. I got the proof 4 days later, and I got it the way you get most proof in a family like mine. Not because I went looking for it, but because somebody got careless. I'd driven up to the cabin that weekend, ostensibly to check on the dock before the weather turned, but really because I needed to stand in a place that still felt like it belonged to me while I decided what to do next. Kayla's car was in the gravel lot when I arrived, which I hadn't expected. She was inside on a call, loud enough that I heard her through the screen door before she heard my tires on the gravel, and I stood there for exactly as long as it took to understand what I was listening to. "Mom, it's fine. I told you, it's fine. The title company's just being weird about it. That's all it is." A pause. "No, she doesn't need to know yet. I mean, Meg's up in the cities half the year. She barely comes here anymore. She wouldn't even notice it's gone until it's already done. And by then, what's she gonna do about it?" I stood on that porch for a long moment, in the cold, listening to my sister explain to my mother, in the exact clipped tone of someone rehearsing an excuse she'd used before, why it was fine that I wouldn't notice my own name had been erased from a piece of my grandfather's land. I did not go inside. I got back in my car, drove 40 minutes to a gas station with decent cell signal, and called Sam from the parking lot and told him what I'd heard. "That's not proof of the forgery," he said carefully, "but it's proof she knew. That matters." I spent the next 5 days building the file the only way I know how, methodically, the way I build every file I've ever touched professionally. I pulled the notary's logbook through a public records request, which showed in Denise Furlong's own handwriting an entry for that date listing only one signer present, Kayla Calloway, notarized alone for a document that legally required 2. I pulled my Phoenix hotel folio and boarding passes. I subpoenaed, through Sam, the estate attorney's file from 2 years earlier, and confirmed the signature page from that folder had gone missing from their records entirely, the only page unaccounted for in an otherwise complete file. I want to tell you what the hardest part of that week actually was, because it wasn't the paperwork. The paperwork I could do with my eyes closed. The hardest part was sitting across from my mother, who I called on day 6, and telling her what I'd heard through that screen door before she knew I was in the driveway. "She's desperate, Meg. She didn't know what else to do. She was going to pay you back once the sale went through. I'm sure of it." "She was going to pay me back," I said, "with my own half of the sale, after forging my own name to take it in the first place. Do you hear how that sounds, Mom?" My mother didn't have an answer for that. She had the same answer she'd had my entire life, delivered soft and certain, like it settled something instead of revealing it. "She's your sister, Meg. Family works this out between themselves." Family doesn't forge each other's names, Mom. That's not working it out. That's just theft with better handwriting. If you've ever caught someone in your own family doing something you could recognize instantly because it's literally your job to catch it, tell me in the comments, because I need to know I wasn't the only one whose profession became a mirror. Stay with me and subscribe, because what happened when I finally called Kayla directly is the part of this story I still think about most. I called her on day 7, 2 days before the scheduled closing. I didn't yell. I have never once in my life raised my voice at my sister, and I wasn't going to start on a phone call I intended to keep as clean and factual as any deposition. "I know about the deed," I told her. "I know it wasn't notarized properly.
I know you weren't in Phoenix 5 months ago, which means I wasn't there to sign anything, and I heard you on the phone with Mom Saturday through the screen door before you knew I was in the driveway." The silence on her end lasted long enough that I could hear her breathing change. When she finally spoke, there was no apology in it at first, just a kind of cornered anger, the sound of someone realizing the door they'd been counting on had already been locked from the other side.
"You don't even use the cabin, Meg. You come up like twice a year. I needed the money. Grandpa would have understood." "Grandpa put a clause in his will requiring both our signatures for exactly this reason," I said. "He didn't trust either of us not to do something like this alone. He was right about one of us. So what, you're gonna have me arrested over a cabin?" "I'm not deciding that tonight," I told her, and I meant it. "But the sale isn't happening in 2 days, Kayla. That part isn't up for negotiation. I already called the title company. I already called an attorney. There's a fraud investigation with your name on it whether I press further or not, because forging a notarized deed isn't a family matter once it's recorded with the county. It became a state matter the day it hit that database." She hung up on me. I let her. "Here's the accounting, because if you've stayed with me this long, you've earned the actuals." Priya's firm withdrew from insuring the sale the following morning, which by itself killed the closing. No title company, no clean deal. And the buyer's own attorney backed out entirely once she learned why. I filed a formal complaint with the Secretary of State against Denise Furlong's notary commission, which was suspended within 6 weeks pending review. It turned out mine wasn't the only questionable file with her stamp on it once investigators started pulling her logbooks. I did not press criminal forgery charges against my sister. I want to be honest that this wasn't purely generosity. Sam walked me through what a prosecution would actually mean. Years of proceedings, my own testimony, my parents forced to choose a side in open court, and a felony record that would follow a 27-year-old for the rest of her life over a debt that, by then, I understood the real size of. Instead, Sam drafted a formal settlement, a quiet title action restoring my 50% interest on record, a signed acknowledgement from Kayla admitting the deed was fraudulent, and a structured repayment plan for her portion of the taxes she'd let lapse during the mess, this time secured by an actual attorney, in an actual office with an actual notary who checked 2 forms of ID. Kayla signed it. She didn't apologize in the room. She apologized 4 months later in a text message I still have and haven't fully forgiven yet, which is its own kind of honest. My mother still tells select relatives that I made a whole legal thing out of a misunderstanding. Fewer of them believe her every year, because the county recorder's amended deed is a public record, and unlike family stories, public records don't need anyone's belief to remain true. The cabin is still there, still standing on those 11 acres exactly the way Grandpa Walt left it, 50% mine and 50% hers, on paper, again, the way it was always supposed to be. I go up more than twice a year now. I pulled the dock myself this past October, alone, the way my father used to, and I stood at the end of it for a long time before I drove home. That's my story. 1 forged deed, 1 careful title coordinator who called the right name first, and 1 clause my grandfather wrote into his will because he understood something about both his granddaughters before either of us fully understood it about ourselves. If you've ever had someone in your family decide you wouldn't notice something was missing, take that as your sign to check the paperwork on anything you own jointly with someone else this week. Share this with someone who still believes family would never do this, because sometimes the only thing that stops it is someone finding out in time. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done in that driveway. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.